Hi there, it's Billy Tarasio with the Modern Divorce Podcast, joined by a two-time guest, Tammy Hugo Haley. Tammy, how you doing?
I'm good, Billy. How are you? Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. So the first time you and I talked about stepmomming and you being a GAL and about you being an attorney, and we got to talking the other day about all of the relationship red flags that we see as divorce attorneys, and we thought we have to do an episode on relationship red flags.
Absolutely. Sometimes we can see them coming. Sometimes we can't.
I mean, I feel like when you are a divorce attorney and you see what makes people's relationships break down over and over and over again for years and years and years, you start to see some patterns.
Absolutely. I mean, I do see definitely some patterns that lead down to that divorce road. Maybe it could have been headed off. Maybe it couldn't have.
Right. So we are going to call this episode, Should I Stay or Should I Go? And I've got a bunch of different questions here from people, a bunch of different fact patterns. So here's the first one. You truly love your spouse. You have a 4-year-old together. You have a lifestyle that works for you. It's very active. Now your husband's 2 teenage kids have come to stay with you for the summer because you split parenting time, and they just want to stay in their rooms and not leave. And it's really cramping your lifestyle. It is not going well. And your husband is not being supportive of you. Should I stay or should I go?
Well, this is like a reprise from our last discussion about stepkids, because these are not your kids. These are like guests in your home, and it's really your husband's job to decide what to do. If they want to stay in their rooms and they don't want whatever they have going on there leaking out into the rest of the home, it's a discussion to have with the husband. As far as leaving him over that, I don't know if it comes to that.
Right. I mean, I think I totally agree with you. Like, you have to understand they're not your kids, but you knew they were part of the package when you got married.
Right.
So that means you have to be loving and welcoming. And if it's cramping your style, go out with your 4-year-old.
I think probably I would have a talk with husband, but maybe see if there's something that you can all do together that's going to inspire the teenagers to join the crowd. Maybe video games, or maybe a day trip out of town, something that's going to interest them.
I totally agree with you. I am part of a couple of stepmom groups on Facebook, and you would not believe how many moms out there really, really struggle with a lack of connection with their stepkids. And I was thinking about this, and it's not that different from having a lack of connection with your own kids. You might find at some point that you don't really like one or more of your kids. Like, there's a personality clash, and what are you going to do? Give them back?
You still love them, but I know for a fact that my mother did not like me between the ages of 12 and 18.
Really?
We know this, yes, but we are best friends now, so it's all good.
So she made it work. How'd she make it work?
Well, I think I grew up a little bit. Teenagers can be a pain. And I think every parent, you just have to know that. And if you're dating somebody with teenagers, yeah, they're part of the package. And I think if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel and there's enough love there and you can support each other, you can get through the teenage years, even if they're not your own teenagers.
I also think one of the things that you should look at before you get married to somebody who has children, and really before you get married at all, is, do we have the same basic parenting values and parenting beliefs? Because those can be widely different.
Right. Some parents don't think their kids should do any chores because they want them to study. They want them to do their extracurricular. They don't want them to mess around with dishwashers and cleaning. And other parents feel that's really important. Like, that's part of growing up is cleaning up after yourself. And there are very different values on that. So you have to agree on that. Like, what do we want to teach them?
Yeah. And I think one of the most dangerous combos is when the step parent is the disciplinarian or the stricter one by nature. That is a recipe for conflict.
You just are waiting for the words, "You're not my father, mother, fill in the blank." Like, that's going to come out at some point.
Right. I mean, you're going to be frustrated with your spouse or significant other because they're not going to respond the way you want them to. And you're going to be disappointed with your stepchildren because they've been raised the way you would have wanted to raise them, and it's just setting everybody up for failure. So if you can't change your expectations, you really shouldn't get married.
If it might have to wait until the teenagers are out of college,
Right.
maybe when they're grown up, maybe the relationship will be more stable, more a strong foundation. But the relationship can't really be just focused on the teenage children. Like, you have to have your own foundation with your partner to get through those tough years and those tough conflicts with stepkids.
Yeah, I totally agree. You brought up so many good points right there. The first is that you can have a relationship and not be married and not live in the same house. And it's almost like some people don't even consider that as an option, but maybe you have this wonderful, loving, fulfilling relationship as a family, and not everybody lives together all the time.
Maybe you have your own apartment, and then during your partner's parenting time, you go to your apartment. And
Give them a
then
little space.
that's the beauty of 50-50 parenting time. It's only half the time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think it's like, let's be honest with ourselves. Let's be honest about our situation, and then make a good decision for everybody involved in that family.
Right.
So
You have to
what's the
consider
bottom
everything.
line, Tammy? Should they stay or should they go?
I think stay until, and then have a nice talk without any of the kids present
I love it.
about how you're going to go forward with these two delinquents in the in the bedrooms.
Nice. Nice.
Actually, they weren't really delinquents. They were just,
They're withdrawn. They're new to the situation. It's a tough time to be a teenager right now. Especially, I mean, they indicated that they were here from out of town, so they don't have any peers. They don't have any friends, and it's hot. So I don't know. I feel kind of bad for the teenagers.
I do too. You have to understand that as the person who's not the parent, you're the stranger, you're the alien in their lives. So you have to tread lightly.
I agree. This next one's a really good one. When I met my boyfriend, he was Prince Charming. He got me flowers, massages, spent all this time with me, made me the most important person in the world. Now we've been together a year, and I don't ever know where I stand. He doesn't pay attention to me, and I don't even think he loves me. What did I do wrong?
Nothing. You picked a guy who loves love bombing.
Love bombing.
We know that term, right?
Yeah. So explain, what's love bombing?
Love bombing is where somebody just showers you with affection and attention and puts you on a pedestal, and you can do no wrong. And you wonder, how did I ever not meet this amazing person in my life? But then you find out that that's actually like a recipe that they follow,
Right. Absolutely.
like playbook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I saw something recently about the difference between feeling anxiety and the difference from feeling butterflies or like very romantically attracted. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's so hard to distinguish between those anxiety butterflies. And I mean, I think sometimes you think, oh, this is too fast. If you ever feel like, well, wait a minute, this is too fast too soon, you're probably right. I think you are.
Right. Or this is too good to be true. Or you're so like, we know that being in love is like being on drugs.
I think chemically it's the same.
Right.
Dopamine.
Right. You are getting flooded with hormones and chemicals, and you are high. You can't eat, you can't sleep, right? You feel high, and you kind of are. And that's a really cool feeling. Like, this is why people become drug addicts. But that's not a healthy relationship, because you don't want to be addicted to this person and them giving you a certain type of attention. That is a recipe for, honestly, an abusive or narcissistic relationship.
Right. And then when they withdraw it, you feel like it's your fault, and this person is going to start doing things to try to reinvigorate those first few weeks or months of the relationship, but those weren't real.
Right. Right. You're absolutely right. And I've got this with clients all the time where they'll look back on their own behavior early on and be like, who was I? that's not me. That person didn't bring out the best in me. I was so clingy, or I was so insecure, or why did I behave that way? And if you are insecure, if you feel like this person is not bringing out the best in you, you can't be your normal a best version of yourself. It's a really, really good sign that you should go.
Yeah. Even if it's at the height of that relationship and you are getting in the throes of being love bombed and candy and flowers and vacations and first class airline tickets, you have to sit there and say, is this for real or is this a show? And if it's a show, it's time to take an exit.
Oh,
Time to
Tammy,
leave
I
the
think I would
theater.
stay for the show. I think I would. I think I would stay for the show. Just don't make any permanent decisions. Don't get too wrapped up, but like have fun while you're being love bombed.
As soon as you see that red flag of flying, though, it's time to walk away.
Withdraw, distance yourself emotionally. Make sure you've got some boundaries and some protection in place for sure. Yeah, the Prince Charming always turns out to be evil. Haven't you watched Disney movies?
Not always. I mean, I know that there are good people out there to date. I mean, I found one, but there are a whole lot of, there's a lot of cautionary tales out there.
Totally, absolutely. Yeah, that's why so many people wrote in for should I stay or should I go? We have a couple other ones. You truly love the person you're with, but there are some red flags and you're not sure what to do about the red flags. And a couple of these came in. One is they don't have a stable job.
Wow. So that's hard because of the pandemic. I feel like maybe some people have some good reasons for that. How long has this been going on would be something I would want to know. I mean, does this person have a track record of always, coming up with this best new business idea, but never following through and always complaining about that terrible boss they had. And that's why they couldn't keep the job for more than 3 months. So it's really, you have to understand that may not change, right? So if somebody doesn't have a stable job, it doesn't mean they won't be a great partner, but you might have to be the one to pay the bills and to, provide the financial stability in the relationship. And how's that going to make you feel?
Right.
Some people are fine with that.
Brought up some really good points. The first one that you brought up was like, is their job stability a indication of instability in all aspects? And I think that that's just such a great point. Like, do they have a history of being through many relationships? Are they moving around all the time? Are they just an unstable person? Because I mean, if we're talking about women do not like unstable. Women like stable.
Yes, we do.
I don't think men like unstable either, but like that's a big thing. And then the other issue is, of course, the financial issue. And we have a lot of questions about the financial issue as well. You brought up a great point. If you earn more than your partner, how do you feel about that? If you have to pay the majority of the bills, how do you feel about that?
And some people are fine with that. And their spouse or their soon to be permanent spouse may be so entertaining and so loving and so wonderful. And, we don't care what they do. He can or she can go shopping all day and that's fine. You just have to have the finances to support that and be okay with it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because one of the leading indicators of divorce is men's unemployment, not women's unemployment, but men's unemployment.
Really?
Yeah. Such an interesting yet sort of not surprising fact. Like, I think it's maybe because women do a lot of the work at home.
Mm-hmm.
They may feel a lot less charitable about taking on a lot of the financial responsibility.
I think too, so much expectation goes with men working and providing that there may be other fallouts from that sort of hit the ego or the their sort of self-esteem that affects a relationship, because you have to love yourself first before you can love other people.
Totally true. I think this is a tricky situation. And there's a difference between out earning someone and like them being unemployed. I think.
I think the reason for the unemployment is really important. Is it a terrible job market, or did somebody just have a bad break? And are they trying?
Mm-hmm.
You know, is that person, you know, is there substance abuse going on? So there's a lot of other places to dig. If you do decide to get married, though, to somebody who does not have any income, you might want to consider a prenup. That's not legal advice. I'm just throwing it out there. It's just something, I can't help it. I'm sure you're thinking the same thing.
Well, I'm thinking don't get married.
You know, and that's the best prenup of all, isn't it? Just don't get married.
But yeah, if you're going to get married, oh my gosh, please get a prenup and please start early. Like we got a call the other day from somebody who's getting married on June 12th and they're like, we need a prenup now. We're like, ah.
Try to get the prenup before you slice the cake.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. You need the prenup, and you need the prenup well in advance of that marriage date in order for the best chances of it being enforceable.
Right.
Here's another one. You truly love, no, you don't. You're not in love, but you've been together a long time. So I've been together with my boyfriend for the last 7 years. It's good, it's stable, but we're mostly friends. We think it's time to get married. I'm unsure. Should I stay or should I go?
Billy, what do you think? I mean, how does that qualify as a loveless relationship?
I don't know. I mean,
Where's intimacy?
that's the question. How's your sex life? I know this is like cutting to the chase, but like as a divorce attorney, I can cut to the chase. And if I am sitting across somebody and they say we haven't had sex in X years, you know, that's eventually probably going to lead to divorce.
That's like a platonic relationship where you're partners in finance and love and life, but you're not. I think people don't really know what they're missing out on when they're in that kind of a relationship.
Until they do, right?
And one of them will eventually, usually, we know this, right?
Right.
Somebody's gonna stray.
Well, here's the deal. Like humans are meant to love and to be intimate. And maybe you have intimacy. And it doesn't matter that your sex life isn't crazy. You have intimacy. That probably works. But if you don't have intimacy, like it's so easy for one person to meet someone who does spark their interest and wind up in an affair. And that's really hard on a relationship.
It is, because the person who committed the affair may have just been missing out on that intimacy. And I would ask this person, are you the only one that's okay with this platonic relationship? Like, are you sure the other person's okay with that?
Right. Absolutely.
It might not be okay.
So before you get married, like really investigate this.
I think this person should go on the honeymoon first.
Ooh.
And see if it will spark something before.
I love this idea.
Go on like the pre-honeymoon.
Totally. I love this idea so much. Like, do you have a blast? Do you love being alone with this person? Or are you just really loving playing the party? I love that idea. Why don't people do that more often?
Because you're so wrapped up in planning a wedding, I guess. I mean, you don't think about taking care of yourselves as a relationship. I always suggest going on a big stressful vacation. My husband and I went to Italy for 2 weeks with my mom before we got married. And it was like, it was so exhausting and fun at the same time.
Did you love
it? Really just tested our relationship on so many levels, but we totally got married after. We had a blast.
That's awesome. Okay, this next question is really interesting. This person has a wonderful, wonderful time with her boyfriend when they are together. They go on fantastic dates. They have fantastic chemistry. They travel well together and have a great time. But then when they're not either on a date or on a trip, it's like she doesn't exist. He doesn't text. He doesn't call.
Sounds like 2 different people she's dating. Now, I don't advocate spying, but what is going on those other?
Right, right. So she continues, I never know where I stand, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to break up with him every single time, but then when we get together, it's so good, I never can.
Well, this kind of reminds me of the earlier love bombing, but maybe is there such a thing as intermittent love bombing? I mean,
Ooh.
what is that? How do you have two separate, it's like dating two different people.
Yeah. I think that this boyfriend is not ready for a relationship, is not really truly ready to commit to you. For whatever reason, he's not in a place where he's not going to be able to meet your needs.
I think that commitment issue is huge. Like you said, like somebody could be really fun during the fun times, like when they need to be on, but
Right,
then when they're not needing to be on, it's like they're not into it.
right.
Remember that movie? He's just not that into you.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yes.
You're just a travel companion.
Right. And he may love you, but if you have kids, he may hate the idea of being with somebody who has kids. Or there may be there's something that is stopping him from wanting to be with you.
Or he's got somebody else. Is this an exclusive relationship?
Totally, absolutely true. Or he's with somebody else too. And yeah, I would want to ask her, have you had the commitment talk?
Sometimes people are the last to know that they're not in a committed
Oh
relationship.
my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Now, is that just a like modern thing? I'm 40, so like that seems so weird to me that you would be like dating and having multiple relationships with somebody at once. Like that seems like it wouldn't work at all. That's terrifying to me.
I think that I think that these days, even in I think we're now in like post COVID, possibly in the post COVID world, like you have to ask if the relationship is exclusive. I
Whew.
do think you have to put it out there if it hasn't, or if you haven't had that talk before. I don't think you can just assume that
Wow.
you're exclusive,
Yeah.
even if you've met his parents or his kids, which
Wow.
actually that kind of scares me. But I think, with the kids, you really need to be exclusive. But
Oh, yeah.
but
Okay.
you don't assume you're exclusive until you've had that discussion.
I think you're right. Something's going on with this guy. Massive red flags. I think when you are unsure about where you stand in a relationship or if you're feeling insecure, um, your body is telling you something.
You got to listen.
Gotta listen, gotta trust yourself.
Yeah.
Next question is a really interesting one, and it has to do with finances. This guy out earns his girlfriend. It looks like 3 to 1. But they moved in together and she's covering at least half of the expenses. All of her money is going to the joint account, and a much smaller percentage of his is simply because he makes more. So he has a lot more of his money than her money. So tell me, what do you think about this?
It's a recipe for disaster because one person is going to be impoverished and the other person is basically, he's being subsidized essentially. So, I mean, a little bit because, either they're going to have to bring down they can't go out to eat every night. They're going to have to lower those living standards, or she's going to need some sort of subsidy. I mean, you can't really do that. I don't think that's really a fair. Sometimes people think that is fair, don't you think? They think, well, I'm living here, I'm sharing half the rent.
Totally. Absolutely. I think this is a tricky issue, and I don't know what the answer is. Like, um, do you need to have a joint bank account in order to have a healthy relationship? Is that is that the way to go?
I think I think everybody's different and everyone's individual, and it depends on how you see money. How do you treat money? Is money really important to one person and not the other?
Mhm.
But when one person is impoverished, that's going to affect their ability to participate in life. When it comes time to going shopping or maybe putting some savings away, they're going to feel deprived.
Right.
And it may look fair on paper, but there's got to be other ways to make that sharing of expenses more fair.
Right. Right. And if somebody makes 3 times more than somebody else, then maybe it's not fair to be contributing equally to household expenses. Maybe it is. Maybe you've combined your households and everybody's paying what they were paying before, and so that nobody's. I don't know. It's an interesting issue, money and relationships. It's very difficult to have two people be exactly on the same page with money. So understanding how to deal with that is not something I really understand. It didn't work in my marriage.
I think that if one person makes a lot more money than the other, sitting down, my favorite advice on this is to sit down and do a budget so that the person who's making less money feels like they're contributing to the relationship, but that they have their own money and they have their own freedom and independence to go buy a fancy bottle of perfume or something. And the other person isn't just completely flush with it. They're going to have to subsidize that relationship to bring some equality.
Yeah.
So you have to be really open with money and what you have and what the expenses are and what you need. We talk about that all the time when we talk to a spouse that needs spousal maintenance, right? We go through every line item and we figure out, what do you need to live your life after this divorce? Well, that's kind of what you have to do in the relationship, and say, how much money do I need? And how much can I afford to contribute? And how much can this guy's making 3 times as much? How much can he contribute to my side of the ledger so that we both can move forward and not feel deprived?
Yeah.
So kind of a divorce in reverse.
Right. Real honest conversation. What does equitable look like? What is fair? And how does everybody get their personal needs met? And it's really complicated because sometimes the spouse that's earning more feels very taken advantage of by the spouse who may not be working and may just be spending all of their money.
Well, you mentioned in your own marriage, this was an issue. You have probably more insight than me.
Well, I just mean it was very difficult to get on the same page. It was very, very difficult to get completely aligned with, how I wanted to spend money and how my spouse wanted to spend money. And we had joint accounts and no personal accounts. And so that sort of dictates that you need to be on the same page. If you have separate accounts, then that's a little less important. If you say, this is your money to make your decisions with, and I don't have a say in it, and this is our joint funds and they're used for that, that might be a little easier. If you have a completely joint account, you really have to figure out how to get on the same page.
Joint accounts are a big step. I mean, I think that more modern relationships, they may have joint accounts for some things and then separate accounts for their own purchases, their own going out with their friends or whatever. But I think that this particular relationship, I'm going to say if the parties cannot sit down and go through all of these financials and figure out how they're going to move forward together in a fair way to where one person doesn't feel impoverished, the other person doesn't feel like taken advantage of,
right,
then it might be time to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. If you can't get on the same page with money or, sex/intimacy, these things won't resolve with time.
And how to raise the kids.
Right.
Those things are huge.
Yeah. Unless you're the step parent and you're just waiting out the kids to get out of the house, then maybe it will resolve with time.
What people don't realize is that kids don't get cheaper though. As they get older,
right?
When they're in their 20s, the funding that it requires just grows exponentially.
I haven't gotten there yet, so.
So they all kind of feed, all of these issues just snowball together if you don't address each one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true. All of these conflict resolution and mutual respect, that's probably like the yes, whatever, no matter what your facts are, if you have conflict resolution and mutual respect, you'll probably be fine.
Well, as divorce lawyers, don't you feel like we should have these perfect relationships because we've already been through everybody, shouldn't we already know this logically? But we don't. We're not perfect.
Nobody's relationships are perfect. You're absolutely right. The next question, and this is the last question I've got, deals with exes and a relationship with your exes. Now, this person asked about their spouse who's very close to their ex-spouse. So a husband writes in and says his wife has been married 2 times previously and is close with both of her exes, and the new husband does not like it. What do you think?
Do we know if they have kids together?
No, I don't know.
I mean, what about that threatens him?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, they're very like how close? Like, I mean, I think there's a difference between being amicable, which is generally healthier. I know that it's kind of the opposite is kind of a red flag. I mean, sometimes when someone can maintain a relationship with someone whom they had this intimate, supposed to be lifelong relationship, and if it doesn't work, but they can remain friends,
Mm-hmm.
that shows some character.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's too close, I think you have to talk to that spouse about it and say, this relationship, maybe if they do things by themselves, maybe if they include our inquirer, that person is invited, if they're going off to the lake together, hey, I'm going to go with my ex-husband to go jet skiing. Why don't you watch the dogs this weekend? That might not go over so well. That's a red flag. But if it's like, hey, let's all plan a trip together, I can't wait for you to meet my ex-husband, he can tell you all kinds of stories about me, I think that's a totally different dynamic.
That would weird me out.
I think it would weird me out too, but I don't know. I think amicability is one thing, but then staying like really tight, close friends, I would explore that further. Like,
Yeah.
Why are they so close? If they don't have kids together, what's the connection? Were they in 4th grade together and they were friends and then they got married for a year and went, this is dumb?
Totally. Right.
Or have they just not let go of each other?
Right.
Because we know that people who go through divorces, maybe they can't be married, but they still have intimacy.
They can. Absolutely. I mean, there are people who are sexually active with their partner while going through divorce, like their ex-partner.
Right up through trial. Right up through trial.
And maybe even sometimes afterwards.
It's not unusual.
It's not. So of course if that's what's going on, of course you've got red flags. If you think that your wife might be sexually active with her ex-husbands, yeah, I mean, that's going to be an issue. The other thing that I see sometimes is when the current partner feels like the ex-partner is too controlling over kiddo issues.
The ex-partner is too controlling.
Right. So for instance, if the ex-wife or ex-husband calls all the shots with regards to changing the schedule, or I think you should do blah, blah, blah with the kids. And there's a perception that the current wife or husband caves too easily or is too, easily manipulated or controlled. So have you seen that?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes one person just doesn't want to keep getting into it, or maybe they just don't, maybe they're just tired of going back to court.
Right.
So they just capitulate to that other, that former spouse, and then they become a doormat.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
so maybe the new spouse is like, you need to get a backbone. And then, hey, I'm now feeling walked all over.
Yeah.
And our lives can't be planned because he keeps coming along and interfering in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where getting that backbone and saying, no, we have to boundaries. I mean, doesn't it always go back to that?
So you think that the current spouse should have some influence over the relationship between the exes.
I think that the new spouse has to be there to support and kind of be the cheerleader of standing up for yourself and not being that doormat, or,
Right.
enforcing those boundaries, because that's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a codependent kind of thing. I mean, I don't know if that even applies here, but it's not easy when you're dealing in this dynamic. In this example, we've got kind of an overbearing ex that wants to just inject himself into your new relationship, and you have to sometimes set those boundaries.
Right, right. And when it involves, their children, that can be a really tricky situation. So there's certain things that are big red flags. Like if your current spouse is allowing their ex-spouse to withhold the kids, that's not good. And just because your current spouse might not want conflict, like the long-term consequences of not seeing your kiddos and allowing the ex to control that is huge. And that is worth you, I think, interjecting. There's some other things that you were mentioning. If you can't plan your life because vacations are being interfered with, or there's always an emergency, like you've got to figure out a way to set those boundaries, I think.
Setting the boundaries, and then possibly even enforcing what those, formally enforcing those parenting plans. Like it sounds like this person's not following their parenting plan.
Exactly.
And just kind of being I do sometimes think that parental conflict might be just a scooch of wanting to interfere in the relationship with the new spouse. That can happen. I don't think it happens every time, but that's something to watch for. Is this really about the kids, or is this jealousy?
Tell me more about that. How do you think somebody can determine what it is?
Oh my gosh, I think that's really personal. They have to really look at the whole big picture and say, well, because there's tools now that you can sort of create some boundaries, right, with some technology, so that you're not getting texted on the weekends when you're with the kids. Like your phone can blow up, right?
Right. No,
That's
you're totally
not
right.
that's not okay. I mean, that's an interference. You're showing up in someone's purse or pocket constantly. And some parents do that.
And some parents do that with contacting their children as well, and incessantly while it's not their parenting time. That is not okay. It's not. That's a boundary that needs to be set.
Right.
So, and I'm glad that you mentioned parenting plans, because there are a lot of parents out there who maybe they get along fairly well, and so they've never really had to go get a parenting plan, or it's been so long since they followed the parenting plan that's in place because they get along pretty well. But that parenting plan, having an updated parenting plan that spells out boundaries, is so healthy, and having something that you can fall back on and enforce is something that you should consider if you're having a lot of conflict with your current partner regarding that.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of times people don't pull out those parenting plans. Their kids might have been 5 and 6 years old when they had it, and now they're 15, 16 years old, or maybe 12, 13. And this thing is so out of date, and the parties don't even live in the same place, and it's got a layer of dust on it.
Right.
And now they don't have anything but their own habits that they've now fallen into.
Right.
And in this scenario, she's giving in to him because it's easier, and he's just become this third wheel. And now I'm in this new, is this a red flag? Yeah, it's a red flag, because your spouse can't stand up for herself.
Right.
And how is that affecting the kids?
I agree. I think it's time to go to mediation. It's time to hammer out a new parenting plan and set some new healthy boundaries for your new family.
I'm a big believer in limiting texting.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, if you, like you had brought up, the other parent is texting constantly the kiddo while he's with mom. I mean, let the kid have his time with mom. One little good night text, or how was school today, but if they're going to be sitting there on their phones all during the parenting time, that can be kind of an interference.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's absolutely an interference. Like I've seen some parents completely abuse the other parent's parenting time through phone calls and texting in the
Yeah, and it's,
name of I should have access to my children. Like you really, really have to set a boundary there.
well, you have to, I think, not send a message to the other parent or the other. I've heard some judges say this, that texting the child constantly and saying, where are you? Are you okay? When they're with the other parent, it makes that child think, well, maybe I'm not safe with my mom. Like maybe
Totally.
my dad is trying to keep me safe because I'm not safe with her.
Totally.
And
Yeah,
so it's really frowned upon these days.
absolutely. It's so manipulative. It's really not okay. So,
But can
okay.
you imagine? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when you have a date, if you're in a new relationship and you're trying to enjoy time with your spouse, but then your former spouse or your children's father or mother is constantly texting you like questions on a Saturday night in the middle of July about parent teacher night in September, and have you made arrangements? Why are you texting on a Saturday night about this? Like, you have to just be aware that, not everybody wants to get those. Try to, not try to interfere on somebody's time off or their weekend, be polite, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's respectful and perceptive. Like, if it's a good time for them to be talking to you, maybe they'll be talking to you on text. If they're not responding, stop texting, send an email, like,
I don't know if you ever remember, there was a show on TV where I think it was on Friends, where one of the actors was calling her boyfriend over and over and leaving these voicemails over and over. And she's like, I'm so embarrassed. I just kept calling him. So they broke into his apartment to steal the.
oh my gosh, I do remember this. I do. Yeah. Like if that's, yes, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like none of us wants to be that character. Don't do that.
Plus, you can't do that anymore. You can't go and get the tape.
Totally true. You can't.
Once
You can't.
it's sent, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. It must have been one of those old school shows. I don't know if it was Friends or Seinfeld or something, one of those, but I don't remember. But anyway, we are out of time for today, but I have loved this episode of Should I Stay or Should I Go? Thank you so much, Tammy. I appreciate you as always.
Thanks, Billy. It was so much fun.
Talk to you soon.